Featured in Forbes and Huffington Post. She's the founder and instructor of Emotional Intelligence, Every Startup's Brain at Harvard University. We're lucky to have a TEDx keynote speaker around emotional intelligence, power of vulnerability, and thinking more rationally. Today, she's here to speak with us about a very important topic, ego and how it affects company culture. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to our very special guest, Ms. Ashley Zahabian.
Can everyone hear me well?
Yeah.
Cool. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So today I really want to just speak a little bit about what company culture is, what can we do to our company culture to kind of just create more results and more happiness and a good environment for us to work in, and what are some of the issues that I see on a day-to-day inside of different types of companies, and what do they do to mitigate these issues? So a little background about what I've been doing for the past few years. I've been consulting in human capital, understanding how we can manage people, all from different types of things, from like managing projects, maybe managing interns versus executives. How do people replace their executives and come up with those decisions? Maybe if a company goes through a merger and acquisition, and you have now two CEOs, how do you pick the right one? And how do you get that company used to the new technologies, culture, and changes that go through that, right? So it's like, how do you manage people? And so today I really want to I want to start this by throwing it back to you and hear a little bit from you guys on what do you think company culture is? What does that mean to you? Can I get some people to answer that question? Yeah.
The feel of how people respond to circumstances within the company.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
Culture of integrity.
Integrity, absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah.
The community.
Community, it's a big one. Environment. And yeah. I'm sorry? Cohesiveness. Team effort. And what about, yeah, go ahead. Purpose, absolutely. And what do you think makes a negative culture? Like what wouldn't you want to come to work to every day? Or what are some things that you might be experiencing in your company today, which you should feel transparent enough to be able to say, like, what are some things that you've maybe experienced in either this role or previous roles or seen that you think can contribute to a negative culture? Complaining.
Lack of communication.
Lack of communication.
Isolation.
I'm sorry?
Isolation.
Ego. Negativity. Non-cooperation.
Divide.
What was that? Divide. Lack of shared beliefs.
Gossip.
Big one. I think that's a big one. I'm sorry? Yes. Anything else?
Feeling of lack of control,
Can you expand on that?
where things are happening around you perhaps, and you don't feel like you have any control in it. You're just sort of a pawn in everything that's going on.
So do you mean, for example, if a company is going through a merger and now you feel like you might lose your job, that kind of thing? So business
Sure.
comes before humans, okay? Good point. Anything else? Good, so these are all really good answers. So something that I really study is what makes a company a negative environment and what damages culture and damages the people within the company. And we did say today we're going to talk about ego, but everything that everybody said is really important. And I really like what you said there is a lot of times, because businesses are so logical, right? We have, every business is logical because they're serving people outside, but managers and executives are trying to figure out how do we deal with people who are the exact opposite of that, emotional. And so I've studied emotional intelligence and want to teach you guys today how we can cultivate that in your company culture, with your colleagues and things of that sort. So I'm going to start with just talking a little bit about what emotional intelligence even is. So did any of you guys start the course at all? Yes. Does anybody remember what emotional intelligence is, or maybe heard it elsewhere? Exactly. That was exactly the definition of the course. So she said it's being able to feel one way, but act a different way for a better outcome. And so in a company, you're kind of forced to do that. But the part of acquiring emotional intelligence only happens when you genuinely feel and have a good attitude while doing it. And so that's the difference. Being forced to be emotionally intelligent is just resentment. But actually acquiring emotional intelligence is understanding that business needs come first. And that's why you apply to this job to contribute. And at the end of the day, we all want to see the company grow. And managers know that in the back of their heads, the people who put the company first are going to be the first people to stay. As a consultant, that's the first thing that we look at in human capital is who's getting fired, right? Like who's bringing the least. It's not always necessarily who's bringing the least results, though. It's also who brings the worst attitude, who's damaging for the culture, who's gossiping, who's affecting those things. Those are all things that are considered. And when we sit and interview these people, that's what we're looking at. So we look at, actually I would say almost every single company I've looked at in their values, emotional intelligence has been one of the top 3 things that managers, executives, and hiring and HR managers look for. And the reason for that is because they're flexible, they have the company in their first priorities, and they're able to get along with people to get things done. And I always say people always think that businesses run off of good strategy and good, just how do we do this? How do we get this done? But it doesn't. And good culture will eat strategy for breakfast any day. Because if you don't have a good team that can execute any plan, it's obviously not going to get done. And if you have a good team executing on an okay strategy, you're still going to get more done than a bad team that has an amazing strategy. So companies spend hours and hours and so much money trying to figure out how do we get our people to do things. So one of the things that we realized that was really helping a lot of our companies was understanding, we'll go back to ego in a second, but was understanding that the number one culture that companies aim to get at is a culture where the truth is valued above anything else. And that's so difficult to do with people because people have opinions, emotions, worries, fears, goals for themselves, and there's just not enough room for that all the time in a business. So what do you do when, you have 10 people who want to become a manager, but there's room for 1? How do managers go about that decision? How do we cultivate an environment where we can make everyone's goals come true? So we try to have these meetings and kind of events like this to talk about company culture and why putting the truth above everything else is the best type of culture for a business. And the more you go along with that, the more you truly believe that, you're going to get more done, and in turn, your managers are naturally going to be more impressed by you. So we see a lot of, in interviewing managers, I hear the funniest things. I'll hear I can't take this person who just CCs me on every single little accomplishment that they do. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. And that's the nature of fear, right? We get impulsive, we get anxious, we want to show people that we're doing work, and that is our ego, right? We're validating ourselves and our own worth. But it doesn't impress anyone. And so that's the issue. So when we put the truth above all else, what that looks like is maybe an employee is sitting down with their manager, and their manager is able to tell them, you're really bad at this. And I have analytics to prove that. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get fired. As a manager, and this is a manager's responsibility to learn to cultivate that type of mentality, is we value you just getting better and receiving that with open hands. So a lot of times consultants will sit in the room and speak to these people about the results because managers don't want to. It is the manager's job, the leadership team's job, to sit there and be able to say, hey, you haven't done so well. Now, there's a big difference between correcting someone and criticizing somebody. A big difference. Criticism brings resentment, arouses resentment, and that's not where we want to go with company culture. Correction has proof, right? Correction is when I sit there and say, hey, is something going on? I noticed that your analytics are, the data that we have on your performance is kind of low. Is there any way I can help you? Is there any way, something going on that I'm not aware of? Do you need anything from me? Versus, you're not doing so well, and, we had a meeting with our managers and we realized, some others are performing a little higher than you. That's criticism. So there's a big difference between, you said communication is a big thing when it comes to company culture. The way you communicate things are really important. And so the important part for managers to realize, though, is that employees are or feel like servants in a business because their emotions are not as recognized as they want. That's just the way business is. Business is illogical, people are emotional. So it's important, even probably more so important, that managers, as the leaders, leave an open room for employees to be able to have a meeting and say, I don't like the way you're doing this, and here's why. And this is something I've, out of all my years of doing this, seen very few companies accept and receive, is that when you have a company where the truth is above everything else, then even the managers that have interns and employees come in and say, I really hate the way you do this, are very receptive to it. They'll say, why? And if for those of you who took my course might realize that I mentioned one of the best ways to apply emotional intelligence in these types of situations is, instead of reacting, respond with a question. Never, the second you hear anything that makes you tense up, respond with a question, not a reaction. Maybe, how did I make you feel like that? Or, am I the only one? Has anybody else said that? Ask a question. What it does is it lets the other person know you're receptive to the information, you're understanding what they're saying, you're willing to change whatever it is that's making them unhappy. And that goes a really long way when it comes to employees. I've left the job because of bad management before. Many people do. I was working at Bloomberg. Amazing. It was my first job out of college, and I left because of bad management. Great salary in New York, beautiful job, nice tech company, couldn't even keep me. So management is a really important, you want to keep your top talent, and it's important for managers to be able to have that communication. It's important for them to be able to say, listen, I'm here to serve you. Just like, you think of it like a parental role. You're there in the management position because you know more than the other person in this specific area. Not in life, you're no better, but in this specific area and expertise, you might have been here longer, and your job is to train the other person, to help the other person. And if it's not working, it's your job to change that and be receptive to the feedback. The same way as kids, we go to our parents and say, I don't like when you do this, I don't like that you don't let me do this, and parents are always understanding why a child might be feeling a certain way. It's the same role of a manager or a leader to do the same, all the way from your direct report to the CEO. That means I should be able to walk up to Michael Bloomberg and go tell him that I think the way he's doing something in his culture is incorrect. And this is one of the things that I think Michael Bloomberg actually exemplifies very well. Unfortunately, not all the managers have, but Michael Bloomberg is somebody who actually took the time to sit with interns in the company to make sure they felt heard by their CEO. A company that has over 25,000 employees, he went and sat every single summer with the intern groups to make sure that they felt heard, they understood the culture. He created a culture of transparency, and we'll talk about that too. Transparency, from what I've experienced, not just at Bloomberg, but many other companies, is when a company shares details and doesn't hold back from their employees. They make the employees feel like they're part of one. And this is something that me, as an, although, a few years ago interning, I wanted to be part of Bloomberg. I was like, I'm entrepreneurial, I want to contribute, and if you want me to contribute, I need to know what's going on in the company. And so something that I've experienced in several companies and startups even that have done a really good job at this is that they will allow any single person in the company, even if it's a private company, to know personal information about the company. So when big decisions are being made, smaller people were aware. In the quarterly meetings, we knew that in 6 months we were talking about an acquisition for a smaller technology. Or we knew, and our voices were heard. There were surveys, there were things of that sort. And when we made the decision, managers and executives would explain to us why we made those decisions, how it's impacting our bottom line. Those are things that I wanted to learn as somebody who, and I believe truly, everybody wants to do their own thing at the end of the day. Everybody has that. That is our ego speaking. Everybody wants to do more and more and more and more. Whether that's going up and being promoted, whether that's becoming an entrepreneur 20 years down the line in the industry, whatever that might be. And so for me, and I know a lot of colleagues, and from interviewing employees, I've heard this, probably 90% or more people want to learn how the company is running. Why did we start the company? What is the purpose? How did we grow? How did we begin? Who are our founding members? Can I speak to them? Can I grab coffee with them? This transparency allows people to feel like they're part of something bigger than just an employee. I can go and be an employee at any company. I can go and be an employee at Starbucks and probably feel better than I did at Bloomberg. And that's sad. But when Mike came and spoke to us, in my entire incoming class, and we were interns at the time, felt a warm welcome. We felt part of the company. Me and my colleagues would immediately stay late. You know, what can we do? We heard that this is where they're trying to go. Oh, we're trying to grow revenue. You know, we want to grow a new vertical, sell to a new vertical. How do we do that? What are some strategies? Those are some things that really motivate employees. How can I learn from my time here? When human beings do not feel growth, they feel stagnant, they feel like they're wasting their time, and they feel like they resent their every single day. And that is the worst type of thing you want to cultivate. Now, the human ego, can I get some, who thinks they know what, or what is your perception of the human ego? I want to hear from you guys. Yeah.
To look good and always be right.
Look good and always be right. Absolutely.
To have a higher sense of being who you are.
Absolutely. What else? Yeah.
Self-centered.
Self-centered.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Do as I say, not, that's a strong one. So like leading by example, but not being able to with your ego. Anyone else? Yeah.
Stubbornness.
Stubbornness. You mean like when you receive feedback, not wanting to be open to it? Absolutely.
Insecurities.
Insecurities, absolutely. Somebody from the back, yeah.
Superior attitude.
Superior attitude, yeah.
Control.
That's a big one. Can you expand on that?
Well, if you're like a control freak, you want to control everything, you want to micromanage, you just want to.
Micromanaging, absolutely, yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Entitlement.
Validation.
Needing validation? Yes, absolutely.
Knowledge.
Yes. Yes.
Hierarchy?
Absolutely. Anything else? These are all really good answers. So according to research, we do find that the ego itself is not specifically in the brain. They say it comes from consciousness, but consciousness is not in the brain. So ego is actually kind of what somebody just said, a sense of self, but the wrong sense of self. And the ego reacts and is activated when we are threatened, when we feel, our body is there to protect us, and that's it. That's the basic function of the human body. How do I keep this thing alive? How do I protect this thing? And so when we have emotions and things of that sort, our ego kicks in to protect those things, to protect our emotions, to protect our feelings, to protect our hierarchies and validate our who we are and where we are in life. And this is dangerous because it's the wrong sense of self. And the same way when we react to our emotions through anger, and it's not the best way to react, our ego is just one of those self-defensive mechanisms. And so ego is something we all have. I have it. Everyone in this room has it. But learning to check it is something that's very important in company culture, because when we have egos, I always say that the worst thing to do, or the hardest thing to do when you gain any type of success, is to shut up about it. That is the biggest struggle you feel. It's not, I have money. It's not, where do I spend it? What do I do with it? It's, how do I shut up about it? And to be quite frank, nobody in this room cares about your success other than the person above you. Why? Because it makes them successful. And that's just the truth. Right? If we're going to value truth, we have to understand where people are coming from. So that's just the truth. We are selfish human beings by nature. And so it's important to understand that if everyone is selfish by nature, why in the world are you going to try? I'm not going to sit here and tell you all about the things that I've done, because you don't care. It doesn't impact your life in any way at all. The only times it does impact your well-being is as a manager, if you're trying to build some credibility as to where you're coming from, so that people are more receptive to what you're saying and understanding it. So this brings the question, as everything that you say, you want to ask yourself, why am I saying this? And this is not just to your employees, this is not just to your managers, it's also to your customers. If I'm going to try and sell something to somebody, I'm not just going to go sell something without asking them questions, learning if they're facing the problem, making sure I understand who they are first. If I'm just going to tell you I have a company, I have a problem, and I've seen this so many times in sales trainings, it's so pushy, there's no point, it doesn't benefit them. And that's something that I think all companies should be trained on, is asking themselves, why am I saying this? There were certain times at Bloomberg when we were selling Bloomberg terminals, which is a large software, to financial people, and we would pitch it to them in a financial term. We can sell you financial data. Maybe to somebody else, like a PR firm, I would say we can sell you time. Instead of spending time looking through all these articles, we weed that out for you. But I'm not going to go and talk about financial data to a PR person because they don't care. And the same thing happens when we talk to human beings. We want to make sure we're pitching correctly, pitching certain things because we are listening to the other person. We're coming from a place of selflessness. We're coming from a place of understanding. And we're coming from a place of, I genuinely want to help you. And that's the difference between correcting somebody and criticizing somebody because of your ego. So those conversations can either go, I think we should do this because, I spent 2 months working on this proposal. I wanted to pitch it to you, aka your manager. I want to pitch this proposal. I think this is a good idea. We can grow revenue here. I can take the lead. I can do this. I. Whereas, a better proposal might look like having, meeting with your manager and saying, hey, I met with this guy, this manager in the sales team. He had a great idea. He said we should do this. I can take, control of this one area, but do you think you can help me find 2 other people who are better at me at these 2 things? Because I think I would spend a lot more time, not because I don't know how to do it, but if you can find 2 people that are really good at this, I can do this part, he's going to do that part, and we can all execute this really efficiently. And I think his idea was really, he had an exceptional idea, and I think if you go and speak to him, he has some really good analytics to back up why this can be a huge opportunity for a company. You see in that statement, I made absolutely no credibility to myself. I didn't come up with the idea. He's got the analytics. Those 2 people are better than me. But guess what? I still had a productive conversation. And I don't think my manager cares if I came up with it or he came up with it or who. If you're pushing the project and you're really valuing what the truth of the situation is. First of all, managers, their resentment can be sometimes bigger than employees. When they hear all the blabber about you trying to impress them, it's like the worst cringy thing they can hear. You do just as a manager, when you hear I think I've been doing really well, and I think that I've reached my target. They know, they see it. Good job, you did what you expected, and now you got paid. That's what you're here for. But the whole point of that is not to take credit, to be a quiet person who does as they say, is not a bother, doesn't poke them 24/7, and just do your job. And when you focus on the truth, you don't feel the need to do that. You're here, you have the job. Just because you hit your numbers doesn't mean you're any better than anyone else around you. Usually, when you do say that to a manager, they go, wow, good for you. And they've got to sit there and baby and put a spoon in your mouth because you need some validation. And not that that's a bad thing. I understand it's a human thing, but it's much easier if we all just valued the truth and said, listen, get your job done. We're all here for the same reason. We're all trying to grow the company. We understand. We all feel part of the company now that we're transparent about it. And let's all work together and just grow. Who cares who gets credit? Who cares? At the end of the day, if you're doing your job, you're focusing in the present and not... I was just actually on the way here in the car. I was with my friend Jerica back there. You guys can say hi. Way to make this awkward. So we're in the car, and I'm reading an article that said almost 50% of our day we're focused on something other than what we're doing in the moment. 50% of our day. That means 50% of our work day, we're sitting there thinking about what we can do tomorrow to impress our manager, or what we can do XYZ rather than just doing the job. That's insane. That means you're getting paid double. That's almost like, if you really think of it in a very objective term, that means you're stealing 50% of your salary. That's insane. So being present is a really big skill. Lowering those anxieties. Your managers see what you're doing. They do. Just as if you're a parent, you see what your kids are doing, even when they don't tell you. You see it. It shows. Do your job. Try to lower those anxieties. Focus on your own inner health. Focus on the company's morale. What are we here for? What is the purpose? We did a survey to find out how many employees in a specific company knew why the product was created at one of the companies I was working with. And less than 10% of them knew how the product was created, based off of what problem. That's so sad. That is so sad. When I think of my first job at Bloomberg and why the Bloomberg terminal was created, when I learned why it was created, not only did I feel more invested in the company, but I felt like I was growing. I learned how successful companies start. I mean, Bloomberg is top 10 richest man in the world. How did he do that? What is his mentality behind starting this project? What was his mentality behind solving a problem? What was the problem? How did he execute it? He explained all of that to us. He actually gave us a book on his journey of starting Bloomberg as a company so we can learn more about him, our CEO, because we're a team. That was something that was so important to me. I learned that Bloomberg started his company the day after he got fired from his last, and he got a severance package of several million, went out, found a problem. He found that when people wanted to invest in bonds, it wasn't a transparent market, which means I had to call bank by bank by bank to find out interest rates, only if I knew the banker, which meant I was probably getting gypped off because they knew I didn't know all the bankers in town. And he said, that should be public data. Let's go create a software that creates public data on these interest rates in real time. There you go. Problem solved. Insane. Wow, I learned that it's better to start a company on a real problem than to start a company because I want to be an entrepreneur. That's a great lesson. I feel like I'm growing. Anything I asked him, he answered. I felt like I was part of that company. I felt like I was in an accelerator at the same time as when I was at my job. I felt like my managers cared about me. I felt like my CEO, more importantly, cared about me. The openness to be able to see and message him and email him and know that he'd respond if I emailed him was extremely valuable to me. These are things that create company morale. These are things that lower our egos. When you're, like you talked about leading by example, talk about lowering your ego. If you ask Mike Bloomberg to this day, is he proud of what he's done? He's gonna be like, I hope people think I've helped the world in some way. This guy donates over 90% of the revenue of the company to philanthropy. So that's called no ego. That's a humble guy, right? Like that's where I felt like I was learning because of his example. And it is important for managers and leaders to have example. A lot of the time, the way we react in life is the exact opposite of what's actually impressive. That's a powerful statement. The way we want to react in life is the exact opposite of what's actually impressive and what actually works. Life is backwards in many ways. Many, many ways. So a lot of becoming a person of work ethic, virtue, morale, like leadership, a lot of that takes fighting your own instinct, not reacting on certain things, being able to control the self. Anxiety and anger, it is the non-existence of control. Because if you had it, you wouldn't react that way. To do that stuff, and that's why the course, I became very passionate about my course, and I hope you guys are all enjoying it, because when you learn to silence that loud voice that just nags in the back of your head, complains, whatever that is that makes you want to rush to a certain goal. Or one of the worst things I've heard was when managers come up to me and say that somebody wanted to be promoted within 5 months of working there. Like, you don't even know the company. How are you going to be promoted? We haven't even gone through the second quarter of seeing your results. I don't even know how you've been doing. What? That doesn't even make sense. And people are so in a hurry to achieve certain things. But you gotta just relax. You're part of a company. If you're here for the long term, it shouldn't worry you whether you're gonna be a manager or not tomorrow. Because if you're here long enough, if you're committed long enough, you'll get there. You just have to focus in the present. Do the job well done today. And do that every day. And if you do the job well done today every day, obviously the trajectory of your career is going to look very nice. But being present is one of the largest commodities to a leader. And it's so hard for people, and that is one of the biggest reasons people stay behind in their careers. They cannot be present. And their anxieties of excelling lead them to so many mistakes and failures, and it makes them look like a foolish person. It's difficult to turn back from that. Once your manager thinks that you're an anxious person that just wants to excel and all you're thinking about is yourself, it's very hard to turn back from that. Very hard. And I think these types of events are really important because it's a growth lesson for everybody. Now everyone starts on a clean slate. We all learned it the same day, right? So being able to sit down with your for managers in this room, it's important that you have that open communication. Ask people that you're managing, Can you criticize me or correct me, talk to me, what can I do better? Those things don't usually happen. I remember in one of the companies I was consulting, one of the managers just never wanted to meet with their people. Never. They just took all the work they got from their manager, they piled on to the next person. No example. Terrible example. If you want people to work hard for you, work hard for your boss. Lead by example. Let them see that you're gaining recognition from your leaders. Let them know that you're working just as hard. Nobody wants to work for an arrogant, selfish person. Don't be that person. Don't pile your work on the person underneath you just because you can. Do not let your ego take over. Work on your own stuff, and whatever you pass down, make sure that there's a lesson behind why you're doing it. Explain to them why you gave them that material, why you gave them that job. Let them know it's going to help them. Let them know where it's going to lead them. That is your job. That's why when a parent tells a kid no, it's important they explain why. Because otherwise they rebel. They create resentment. It's the same thing when it comes to any type of superior person is going to threaten the human behavior. And it's your job to mitigate that threat, to open that door, to make somebody feel like you're on the same exact level as them. Because at the end of the day, we all are. I might be, excelling in human capital. If you put me in a law firm, I would have no idea what I'm doing. I know nothing about that industry at all. It's not my industry. We're all beginners somewhere. We're all in the same place. Some people have more years in their career, but they also have more years in their life, and that's normal. That's just relative ratio. There's no reason to be threatened. There's no reason to feel like you should hold back what you're actually feeling if you're feeling some sort of resentment, the same way you wouldn't in a relationship, the same way you wouldn't in a family, right? This is a family, it's a company, you spend most of your life here. It's important to really involve yourself in the company, in the culture, in the purpose of the company. What's going on? Why did we start? Not every law firm starts the same way. One might start because he was an entrepreneur, and now he wants to do IP law. Maybe that's just what problem specifically did he solve? Are we a unique law firm? What's important to the CEO? Is it important that he grows the revenue, or is the CEO's goal to maintain what we have and create every CEO has something different. To Mike Bloomberg, his goal was create revenue for philanthropy. If anybody in the company did philanthropy, they got the day off. You want to go do something, you want to go to one of the events, take the day off. Go. That was the most important thing to him. He wanted to be known for his philanthropy. And so understanding that helped me learn how can I help him. To this day, if I ever want to do anything in philanthropy, I know the guy to go to. I know what his interests are. Climate change. That's important to him. He just wrote a book on it. It's important for me to know that. Because if anything comes up, I know how to bond with that person. I know it's important to them. Right? What's important to your CEO? What's important to your manager? What's important to your colleague? How are you guys going to work together? You guys are human. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has mistakes. Everyone's bad at stuff. It's not a big deal. Our egos are so loud. Sometimes we just have to realize and put ourselves into perspective. When I took a plane here, you look down and you're like, wow, I am literally so small in this world. Like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you feel part of something, you're doing something you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, get out, don't stay. If you do enjoy it, go all in, commit. Be part of the company. Be part of the community. Be part of the environment. And work together to get something done. And this is why it's so important. Communication is a big part of that. Feel free. I think after this meeting, I hope that certain people let feelings out that they've been feeling to their managers or vice versa, to their employees. It's important. If somebody's doing something wrong, correct them with a heart. Tell them why it's important to change that behavior. And for the managers and leaders in the room, it is so important that you let your team know they are not being judged on doing wrong. They're being judged on not accepting the wrong that they're doing. Those are two different things. It's important that you're not making them feel like because they did wrong, they are not the first person you'd go to ask for help. They are not the person that you think is the best on the team, or whatever that might be. It's important that you feel that if I accept this correction, I will be rewarded. That is good company culture. That is truth. Because the truth is, nobody has a company where everyone performs exceptionally well. not even the CEO. Many CEOs actually barely do a lot of the work, and it's important to understand that too. I know that many of the CEOs I speak about spend their time in politics, they spend their time in philanthropy, they spend their time with other CEOs and maybe on the golf course or dinner table. That's their role. They've reached that role. It's their company. They deserve it, right? You'll be there one day too, but it's their job to help you get there, to make you feel like you're growing, give you that progression. There's a lot of research done on the difference between rewarding somebody for good behavior versus punishing someone for bad behavior. You guys have probably heard this, it's in my course as well. There's a lot of studies done with animals. They learn, I think it was like 47% times quicker when you reward them for their good behavior than when you punish them for their bad behavior. Right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't mention what's going wrong, but it means you should highlight what's going right. And turn to your colleague and do the same. If I'm a manager and I see that there's a person on my team that never takes, the self-loathing path and always goes, good job, man, that was awesome, like you made our team look so good, like I'm gonna be like, damn, I want that guy to be captain. He lets everyone else feel great. That's great. Even though he didn't do it. He just gave a high five to everyone else. I'm gonna be like, I want you to be captain. When I played soccer, I was captain of my team. When I chose the next captain, that's what I looked for. Who's gonna be a good sport? Who's gonna do that? Is so important. That quality, that commodity on a team is so important. And if you can just realize how impressive that actually comes off and how logical it is to behave that way and to not pat yourself on the shoulder and to not try to prove yourself all the time because you don't have to, sometimes silence speaks louder. And from the hundreds of interviews I've done with managers, it is the number one thing they love. When they don't have to pat you on the shoulder, they don't have, because you're in the present. You're too focused in the present to focus on the future or something you messed up on in the past. You're just focused on doing a good job today, every single day. So I want to open this up now to some questions. Unless you guys want me to continue talking, there's a few other topics, but I do want to open up to some questions on what I just previously spoke about. And then if we have some time, we can go forward. Go ahead.
So what is the disconnect here between Bloomberg being such a phenomenal CEO, such a phenomenal person who should guide his company and lead by example, to you leaving because management sucked?
Yeah, because of micromanagement. So
didn't he lead and create management that was going to keep you there?
So Bloomberg's a big company. Bloomberg does his best to, speak to as many people coming in. He makes it a priority to speak to new people coming in. But there's over 2,000 managers in the company. There's no way, he's going to sit there and micromanage his managers. And sometimes people get the best of themselves. And so bad management is a thing. And when you communicate and there's no change, you get up and leave and find another opportunity. And so when I had the opportunity to create the course that I created for you guys at Harvard, I took that opportunity. Not to say that Bloomberg is a bad company. It's probably one of the best companies I've ever been at. Just poor management in the department I was in. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. One is, how do you feel about competition in the workplace?
Competition, you said?
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, your manager has one goal. How he gets there, he doesn't care. He doesn't. I've spoken to so many people, sales managers. My goal is to hit this target. You guys make it happen. Whoever helps the team and brings good attitude to make it happen, makes it happen. It's not always the person with the most sales that's going to get rewarded and promoted. Definitely not if they have a bad attitude about it. People who get promoted are humble people, they're leaders. That's what management's about. How do you train people to do better? It's not always about how you do better. Of course, you should walk your talk, but, effort goes a long way. And when it comes to leadership, a lot of that has to do with how did you nurture 10 other people to create the goal that the manager was trying to do. Not how did I do this all by myself and take credit for everything by myself. Competition is silly. Same thing if you look at a sport, if you have competition on the field, someone wants all the credit. You forget to pass it to somebody just because you wanted to score, you usually miss. Had you passed it, you would have made the goal, whole team would have been happy. So, yeah.
And what do you think the difference is between emotion and feelings? Like, what's the distinct difference?
Emotion and
Feelings, like feelings and emotion, what's
I would say feelings are something that you would express. Like I can say I'm sad, I can say I'm happy, I can say I'm angry. I think emotion is a chemical thing. It's an actual like a signal in the system that travels, and you can actually see like in the waves in the brain and where the activity is traveling. So in specific areas of the brain, like the amygdala, which is our emotional brain, or you see more activity, you would say there's a lot of emotion taking place right now because it's in that area of the brain. Whereas a feeling is like, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm excited, things like that.
Yeah, a lot of what you were talking about had to do with creating the transparency and accountability. What are some of the best practices you've seen in terms of creating equal accountability between management and employees?
Equal accountability. Well, I would definitely say the manager, if the manager is putting work on somebody, you should also be either have done that work really well and prove that, and be doing more work now, and also explaining the accountability of a manager is to explain why I'm doing this work. Like if somebody's just going to plop work on my table and say meet these targets every month, I kind of feel like, all right, like here I go again, like every week, same thing. But if you sit down with me and say, hey, this week this is what we're going to do, here's why it's important to the company, here's why we switched this thing and changed it and made it this way, or and maybe talking from your experience as well. When I was in this role, we did it this way, but I think that the pivot that they made to do it this way is actually a lot better, and here's why. And this lets me as an employee feel, I know that you're credible from where you're speaking. You're not speaking from, a superior level, you're speaking from a truth level, right? It's fact. If you're showing me why it's better, oh, that makes sense to me, okay. I'm gonna be more, open to receiving that guidance, because now I understand why, not only for myself, but for the company as a whole. I always say when you speak from the company voice rather than the manager voice, you come from a very humble place. If I'm managing somebody and I say, guys, our company, we've just exhausted sales in this market and we need to come up with like a new way because 90% of our revenue comes from these specific sales. We kind of put our eggs in one basket. Do you guys mind helping me? So my manager, I'm being transparent with you. My manager gave me this assignment and I'm struggling to come up with ways to find a new vertical. Do you guys mind if we have a meeting at this time and we can all maybe discuss and put all of our heads together? That, to me, comes from ooh, exciting opportunity to do well, exciting opportunity to speak my voice, exciting opportunity to innovate. I feel like I'm learning what it's like to be a manager. He told me what he needs to get done. I feel a good relationship because now I feel like my manager wants to hear from me. I'm part of his decision making. All of that's really important. In HR, it looks something like, guys, we're interviewing, like a startup, we're interviewing. Do you guys all mind coming into the room and meeting this person? I want to hear your opinions when she leaves. Great. Wow, my manager cares about what I have to say about hiring. That means that they trust my work ethic. That means that they trust that I know what I'm doing here. I feel like I'm part of the decision-making process. So I think the accountability is not always the same work, but it's being part of the same team. Anyone else? Yeah.
What is your opinion on the difference between leadership and management?
I think the word management is a very organizational word, right? It's really for structure. We have our interns, we have our employees, we have our managers, we have our executives, C-suites, and then we have our CEO, which is part of the C-suite. That's management. It's a role, right? Like job posting. We're looking for a manager to help us manage. Leadership is a style of management, right? You can have an employee, which is a title, like a manager, who's lazy. You can have one that's hardworking. So you can also have a manager who's arrogant. You can also have a manager who's a leader. And I think leadership is a style of management. Management is just a title. And titles kind of sometimes mess with their heads. Another great thing I loved at Bloomberg, there's no titles on business cards. I could meet somebody and I see their name tag, everyone has a name tag. I had no idea if I walked past a C-suite or I had no idea if I walked past a janitor. We all had the same badge, same right. It was amazing because everybody treated each other welcomely. I would meet with someone maybe and then later find out on our software, oh my gosh, that was literally the guy that works right under the CTO. I might as well keep a good connection, send him a nice email. I wouldn't have known that meeting him. So that's one of the things that I really liked as well. Titles are titles. It's for job postings. It's for organizational structure. but your character speaks a lot louder than your title.
So if you're leading a team, what are things that you do, to communicate with your team, just to kind of be on the same page? What are things you implement there?
I think something important to do is tell them what you do on your day-to-day. Like, if I'm a manager leading a team of 10 people, I think it's important, just as they come to you and tell you their progress and how they've been doing, for you to say, hey guys, I know all you guys are going to be like, managers one day, or you guys are going to have more responsibility as your time comes. I feel it's important that I let you in on my decision-making processes on my role. This week I was tasked to do this. Here's why my manager wanted me to do that. If you guys have any input that can help me, I'd really appreciate it as well. Let them in on it. Not only is it good for them, but it helps you as a manager. Managers don't always know what they're doing. It's sometimes nice to have feedback from other people. Managers don't think you don't know anything. They just know that they've been there longer, they have a little bit more responsibility, they maybe have client relationships, they know the jargon of the industry a little bit better. It doesn't mean they always know everything. So sometimes even opening that door and saying like, I'm assuming you'd want to learn a little bit about what I do as well, so that you know what you're getting yourself into if you do stay here as well. That transparency can go a long way. Yeah.
In terms of ego, with your years of research or an experience, do
Yeah.
you think that if you meet a highly egotistical person, it's in all facets of their life, or do you think the ego is just heightened because we're in a work environment?
It's a good question. I think everyone has an ego. Based off of research, there are two things that impact that. The closeness of the person, right? Like how threatened are you by this person? And the importance of the situation. So, if somebody gets promoted in a different department, I'm not threatened by that, because even if they're a close person, the situation is not close to me. It's not of relevance to me. So, it's not the situation of just somebody getting promoted. Who gets promoted matters, and how relevant is that to me? Does it threaten me? Did they take the position I applied for? Did they, So I think we all have egos. Like I have an ego. Everyone has an ego. We all have different things that are important to us, and we all have different people that are important to us. So depending on those two factors, I'd say it fluctuates and reacts very differently. Yeah.
In your course, you talk about bridging the gap between the logical and the emotional, and using meditation as like a method for that. I think that was one of the most interesting things. So how do you apply that to bridging the gap, I guess, between being overcome by ego and selflessness?
So I think that ego is very similar. So for those of you who didn't see this part of my course, I talk about like the emotional brain and how quick it reacts in certain situations, and how important it is to understand that when somebody else might react in a certain way, like for example, if a manager hears somebody's trying to, maybe promote some of the work that they did or react in certain, it's important to understand where did that behavior stem from, and instead of feeling resentment or judging that person, understanding that like, oh, hey, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job to realize that they don't feel validated in their work, or, why did they behave the way they did? And so she's asking, you said, how do you bridge the gap between ego and selflessness? I think it's very similar, because the ego is part of that impulse, that anxiety, that fear center that we have, right? It's a threat. And the second the brain feels a threat, even if it doesn't have any context whether it really is a threat or not, it's going to react. And only until a delayed reaction does it process through our prefrontal cortex, where it kind of brings context to the situation and says, oh wait, that's actually not dangerous, I shouldn't have reacted that way. And the same thing happens with our egos. And so when you do meditate or ask questions or practice these things, you slow that process down and kind of allow the stimulus that was a threat at first to process through the logical brain. Or check in. And I use the example of like a dog that has to go to the bathroom, when it first like reacts and it just pees all over the house, but you teach it to kind of check in with you before it has to pee, right? Like that's what we want the stimulus to do before it just goes to the emotional brain and reacts. Let it go to the emotional brain, let it feel, check in with the logical brain, and then behave. And that's kind of the process we want to teach our brains to do. And it doesn't only impact your life at work, it impacts your everyday life, going into interviews, when people ask you those behavioral questions, what's something you are bad at, and the first thing you say, I'm terrible at like being an overachiever. Okay. Like, it's so hard. I just stay up all night working. Wow. But that's like your first reaction because you're nervous, right? Like, it's so much more impressive to just be like, I'm really bad at music. It's not my thing. Okay, cool. Like, I don't look at you any different because you're bad at music, you know? Unrelated, it's the truth, and you're not anxious about your answer. And interviewers in HR are the funniest people. They read this stuff like no tomorrow. So your natural behavior changes, right? Whether that's an interview for a job that you want, whether that's you're on a date, whether you're in an argument with a spouse or a colleague of some sort, your behavior changes. And I use the example, and we were talking, somebody here, forget the name, somebody told me about the horse example. I really enjoyed it. And I talk about how I previously was working with horses, and I remember jumping on a horse one time, and it kicked me off and like stepped on my toe. It injured my toe, and I didn't realize why it freaked out when I went to touch the horse. It was like on a farm, and the guy was like, "You can't just do that. Like, it's gonna react. It's gonna be anxious. It's gonna be scared." And I was like, "Wait, but you just did that. Like, why can't I do that?" And he was like, "Well, I built trust with the horse." And I was like, how do I do that? And so it took me like months of training to finally build trust with this horse. Like, I literally had to stare at it from outside a fence for like a week. And, like, I'm not kidding. And then I had to like talk from a distance, and the thing would just like stare at me and then like turn around and not even care. And then I had to like walk in circles around the fence, and then go in the fence but on the outer edge. Like, learn how to like why I have to like touch its shoulder and let it look at me before I approach it. Like, there's an art to dealing with a horse. But once you train one horse, all other horses know that you understand them. And that's the beauty. I can go up to any horse now, and it won't jump, and it won't panic, and it knows, oh, she understands me. She understands how my brain works. And the same thing kind of happens with humans, as I've realized, is that once I learn to understand my own brain, my own self, take control of that, I can go up to other human beings, whether that be an executive, whether that be a manager, whether that be an interviewer, and there's an immediate trust. There's this, she's on some sort of conscious level, she's calm, she's present, I can sense it, I trust that. There's a trust, because it's so difficult, but when you can sense presence, when you can sense calmness, you learn to build a trust for their work ethic, for their values, for their honesty, for their friendship, for their companionship, whatever that might be. And it's helped me throughout my career. I mean, at 19 years old, I was able to go into companies and do just this to other executives. And that's something that I've always questioned why, but now I realize it's because there's a commonality of character. And when you have a commonality of character or a similarity, there's a trust and a bond. And, you know, when I see people also creating courses at Harvard, I'm like, oh, I already know what kind of work ethic you have because I've been there. You know, my friend Jerica back there is a black belt. She is security, guys. She's a pro fighter, guys. She just won her last fight. So we were talking about how, like, when you are a black belt, it's, you know, somebody who's a yellow belt comes to you and says, I'm a black belt, and you take them in the gym for one day, in the first, like, minute, she'll know this person's not a black belt. And that behavior, like, by the way they punch, by the way they, you know, stand, by the way do they bow when they get on the mat, like, all those things that she's been through, she knows what it took. So when she sees somebody else doing similar things, she'll know that person's been there, that person's done that, that person's, you know, that's their training style, that's, you start to learn that. The same thing with behavior is that once you conquer and the same thing happened with the horse. Like, once I conquered one, the horse knew, I waited till it looked at, you know, gave me eye contact, I approached him by the shoulder, immediately he knew, she must know, I feel safe, I don't feel threatened, I don't feel this. There's certain ways to approach certain situations. And so I think bridging the gap is very similar to lowering that anxiety, gaining emotional intelligence, checking your feelings, checking your emotions, and being able to think before you act. And I think they kind of go hand in hand.
For the culture you want to have in your work environment, what's a good interview question that you would ask somebody?
I think the best interviews are like I would take somebody. I like this style of taking somebody to dinner and having their waitress like mess up on their meal and seeing how they behave. Like I'm very like situational. Like how do you treat people is a big thing for me. I read it somewhere. It's not even I read it somewhere. It was a great idea. I think it's great.
The correct answer is you give them an opportunity to correct it.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
The correct answer is you give them an opportunity.
I think that the way, people who can be present with other human beings and the way they treat people, speak volumes. Skills can always be taught. Yeah, they found this one really funny.
So based on obviously ego being like a guard for a cover-up for deeper insecurity, how would you say, because usually ego is covering that, right? So how would you say that you would create steps for humility?
For yourself or for other people?
For other people.
So how do you mean, like, how do I teach someone to be humble? I think by being vulnerable yourself. I think the more, if I can stand up here and say, hey guys, when I started college I had a 2.6 GPA. Right, you did not think that when I mentioned I created a course at Harvard, but that's the truth. I had a 2.6 GPA, I was very sick in the beginning of college. That opened the door for other people to mess up. Now somebody else who maybe has a low GPA or maybe feels like they're not good enough academically can immediately connect with me. And they can become humble now, right? They don't need to have that defense. So I think, again, be honest, truth above all. The truth matters. Everyone has, no one's perfect, no one. The truth is so powerful, and I think vulnerability is the best way, especially in managers, to be able to admit their flaws that they made. The best moments I've had with any manager, even at Bloomberg, that I've ever experienced was when somebody admitted that they had made a mistake, and I immediately felt room to make mistakes too.
You're interviewing.
Yeah.
And you're trying to avoid the people that have the ego, so you don't have to necessarily work to reduce it instead of have a team player. So what would be questions, I think, is what we're trying to get.
Like behavioral questions?
Something that you can say, okay, it wouldn't work because the ego is just a little bit too high and we don't want to try to work on people's reducing ego versus cultivating culture or bringing people that are already there.
So I think one of the biggest things that HR looks, they don't really look to try and lower or make you feel comfortable. I think the purpose of an interview is the opposite. It's putting you in uncomfortable situations and seeing how you handle those situations. So when people ask things like, tell me something you're good at, bad at, good at and bad at. Like I said, some people are like, I'm really bad, like overachiever, and I'm really bad at that. Like I just stay up. Those are things where they're like, this person is going to have a really difficult time with other people. Because that's the type of answers they're giving, that's their behavior, even in an interview setting. Whereas when people do come in, and this is actually very true at Harvard Business School and Harvard undergrad, most of the interview questions, or not most, but there's a lot of behavioral, right? And they'll ask questions like, tell me something you want to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing. And a lot of people go back to their academic or work, and I want to continue working really hard at this company, or I want to continue working here after my MBA, or, I want to stop, sleeping so late because I work really hard. And it's so silly. Like, just tell me you want to stop, biting your nails, you want to start calling grandma more, and, that's the truth. I don't call my grandma enough. We can all relate, you know what I mean? I think that's where HR kind of tests and gauges character, and that's why those behavioral questions are there for this exact reason. What are you going to be like in the culture? At the end of the day, they don't really care about what you want to start doing. They just want to see how do you respond to pressure? How do you respond to those things? And so for HR, I would say it's not really their job to create humility in someone. Their job is to see whether you already have it. Exactly. Yeah. So it's going to be things like that. What are you good at? What are you bad at? What's a time where you face a really difficult opportunity? It's going to be story kind of questions, tell me a little bit about you.
Do you feel like it's more about their answer than it is about the question and the way they respond?
Absolutely. 100%. like 120%. Yeah. Just raising. Hey. He's just like bicep curls here. Okay, they're working. They're working, guys.
The mic drop, that's the one.
Yeah, but see, at least he has biceps though. If he didn't, that would have been a different story. That's good teamwork. I'm complimenting you. You got biceps. Yeah.
What's the difference between avoiding confrontation and handling confrontation with the question? I mean, I love that, that's how you respond, but how is it not coming across as avoiding the issue?
By asking a question back?
Yeah, so you ask a question back, then what's next?
You want to understand why they're coming from that point of view, and sometimes not that you shouldn't confront the situation, because you should communicate about it, but instead of reacting in the beginning and flaming the situation, by asking a question, you calm both people down, you let the other person feel heard, you give yourself a second for whatever just happened to enter the logical brain, because there's a delayed reaction, so that even you can react more rationally. So
I guess the importance is, what is that question? So
I
that
think
it
it
doesn't
depends.
come across as avoiding what they're coming to you about.
I think the question should always go back to trying to understand why they feel the way they feel, or why they said what they said. So if somebody comes to me and says, like, I think you're too loud on the phone when you talk, that it like completely distracts me, and I can say, oh, I'm sorry. Is me speaking so loudly like getting in the way of your phone calls? Does everyone feel that way about me? It just lets the other person know that you're not like right on the defense, oh, sorry, okay. That creates some sort of resentment, and immediately now you guys are like looking at each other with awkward heads. Yeah. Yeah.
You can hear me well?
Yeah.
So, would you say horizontalism is an important key factor in organizational culture?
Do you mean in terms of promotion, or in terms of?
So, you know how you said it's beneficial for an employee and they feel like they have a place in an organization when the CEO talks to them directly?
Yeah.
Do you think it's also vice versa, where employees should feel free and not have fear to go up to their CEOs directly for an opinion? And
Absolutely.
not to go through their direct management?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think a lot of resentment from a manager side could be when like an employee goes over the head, and speaks to like a department head instead of their direct report. I think you should bring them in on whatever, or let them know, or ask, just ask them, is it okay if I speak to this? I didn't want to leave you out of this conversation because I report to you, and I just want to make sure that it's not going to affect the way your relationship with that person. And I think most of the time it should be an okay. If not, they should explain why, and try to help you in other ways. But I think it's important to respect the hierarchies that are in place, just as you wouldn't, or I hope you wouldn't go and marry someone without letting your parents know, or, make a decision over your parents' head. There's just a respect that goes there. But if if both people are doing their work, then you should feel actually like you're being helped rather than, surpassed. Anything else, guys? Cool.
How could we ever repay you for that? I mean, that was just loaded with value. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
I personally took away "Don't mess with Jericho," but
She literally woke me up one time because I stay here at her place. She woke me up in a chokehold. She's like, "You should have been ready."
our leadership team actually, we call ourselves the Genius Makers, because our reciprocity style that we try to promote in our culture is to be givers, and so that's our thing. And so we have a coin that we give all of our Genius Makers, and we'd love to honor you with one of these as well. And it's our Genius Makers coin, and it has our mission and vision on it. I don't want all of us to say our mission at once because I'm afraid.
We should do the vision.
Should we try?
Try.
I'm just afraid that we're gonna botch it. But I'm actually very confident, actually. I'm confident. Can we all recite the vision together?
Let's hear it.
Yeah?
To be
the
nation leader
that
we can experience.
And
We inspire and empower people affected by death by providing essential service to draw them into excellence.
wow! Guys, this was a very special event. I couldn't have ever even imagined that it was going to be this successful. So actually, truly,
Thank you guys for making it so great and like, you know, talking back and like making it an open communication event. It really was amazing.
I know there's going to be people that want your autograph later, so.
Take
But-
Jerica's too. She's going to be.
But guys, thank you for your time. Let's go ahead and head back to our departments and let's make it a wonderful day. Thank you so much.